Greetings, everyone who is tuned in to the King Breaking the Silence webinar. We are joined by four incredible panelists. We have Aaron Gil Wilson, we have Caleb Kabebe-Tale, we have Yancy Harrell, and we have Bill Wiley-Kellerman, who have been convened today to share how their respective work as peacemakers and organizers is interconnected and situated within a global project. We convened today to explore how our world is detrimentally shaped by a culture of violence that is rooted in racism, materialism, and militarism. We convened today because we know the normalization of this violence must stop. King urged us then, and it still rings true today, that we have a choice to move toward nonviolent coexistence or violent co-annihilation. Day in and day out, we lament how resources and energies have gone towards sustaining the latter for far too long. So it's time to shift towards liberation if we shall ever know peace. So I am going to start by introducing all of the panelists that we have here today. And I will start with Bill Wiley-Kellerman. Bill Wiley-Kellerman is a nonviolent community activist, author, teacher, and retired United Methodist pastor who's rooted in Detroit, Michigan. Over the last 5 decades, his work has grown from direct action in anti-war and anti-nuclear campaigns toward organizing more broadly with the Michigan Poor People's Campaign and the water struggles there to challenge systemic racism, poverty, the war economy, as well as ecological devastation and morality that we're facing or in our nation. So next, I will go to Yancy Harrell. Yancy is an anti-violence grassroots organizer here in Philadelphia. And alongside his wife, Dr. Movita Johnson Harrell, they formed the Charles Foundation, which centers on improving the lives of young people, bringing opportunities to Philly neighborhoods, and working to end gun violence in honor of their sons, Dante and Charles, whose lives were tragically cut short due to gun violence. Now, I'm going to introduce Aaron Gil Wilson. Aaron is the co-executive director of Urban Advocates, a Philly-based nonprofit founded by youth to advocate for youth to have equitable and quality education here. She's a freshman at Cheney, and she's studying criminal justice. And before all of these impressive roles she has now, she founded Mentally Eat, which stands for Evolve, Achieve, and Transform with Aaron to spread awareness about mental health in our Black and African American communities. And last but certainly not least, we have Caleb Kabebe-Tale, and he's a longtime organizer, despite being quite young, from the Cambridge, Boston metropolitan area, who moved to Philly to study computer science and Black studies at Swarthmore. His organizing areas of interest include advocating for police-free Black neighborhoods and technology and political education for Black communities. He's heavily involved with SJP and the Black Student Union on his campus. So I want to say welcome, everyone, and thank you all so much for being here on this panel. All right. So to honor the framework of our discussion, which is an annual reminder of what King stated in Beyond Vietnam, A Time to Break the Silence, I'll be asking my questions with direct quotes that come from that speech. So this first question is going to go towards Yancy and Aaron. So in thinking about a culture of violence, Dr. King said the following: As I have walked among the desperate, rejected, and angry young men of the ghettos of the North, I have told them that cocktails and rifles would not solve their problems. I have tried to offer them my deepest compassion while maintaining my conviction that social change comes most meaningfully through nonviolent action. But they ask, and rightfully so, what about Vietnam? They ask if our own nation wasn't using massive doses of violence to solve its problems, to bring about the changes it wanted. In today's context, I want to ask, for those of us engaged in that community-centric work to reduce gun violence or end gun violence, how do you try to shift this culture from the ground up through grassroots community engagement? So maybe I'll popcorn first to Yancey, if that's all right.
Good evening, everyone. My name is Yancey Harrell. I'm the founder and co-founder of the Charles Foundation. Charles is the acronym for Creating Healthy Alternatives, Results That Less Emotional Suffering. Charles was our youngest son. He was 18 years old. He was murdered 13 years ago in a case of mistaken identity. I actually had another son murdered in New York that was 26 years old, a month after Charles. And in 2021, our 31-year-old son, Dante, was murdered in California while he was on vacation. So the Charles Foundation actually came out of when Charles was murdered. People started calling me and my wife when somebody got shot. They said, you need to call Yancey Movida. We were showing up at hospitals. We was taking food to families and stuff like that. I'm also a permanent pantry here in Philadelphia. I'm also a civic association here in Philadelphia. And we also have a March for Our Lives chapter. So we also teaching kids how to become community activists. But one thing that I realized, the area that we are in Philadelphia is a food desert. And one thing that I realized that most of the kids that we work with, we got to be I partner with the Horticultural Center. So they pay us to pay the kids to clean up the community. So we pay the kids $100 for 5 hours of work on a Saturday. So what we start doing, we start cutting that time in half. So what I did, I started having speakers come down to speak to the kids because me, myself, I've shot someone and I've been shot. I'm an ex-offender and I'm a recovering addict. I've been clean for 32 years. So I can meet them, at the level where they need, the communication. But I try to redirect the kids because a lot of the kids I deal with have guns. So I tell them they can't bring a gun into my facility. So what they do, they hide the gun outside somewhere and they'll come inside. And they're great kids. One of the reasons why they're carrying guns is because all these other kids have guns and they're easily accessible. And doing our research and working with these kids, we found out that there were police officers that were selling guns. I found out that somebody in South Philadelphia was renting guns to kids. So we started a campaign where we went around to different stores, poppy stores, and if they were selling toy guns, we made them take them off the shelves. So that's one of the things that we did. And then I would get the kids outside of my program, and if they needed food, Pampers, contraceptives, Narcan, anything that they needed outside of the ordinary, they could come to me and my wife and get those things. So these kids that we've been dealing with, they called me for all kind of stuff. They said, I was in Miami and a kid called me and said, Mr. Yancey, could I have $20? I got a job to do. And what I'm trying to say is most of these kids have families at home, but we have built a relationship with these kids where they trust us and they come to us and tell us things. And one of the things I want to say is the city of Philadelphia, you got a black mayor, you got a black police chief, black head of city council, the whole city council is black, and Philadelphia is still a black hole. We have to ask ourselves, I told Michaela from the beginning, I don't like doing Zooms because it's hard for me to sit still, but we have to stop recycling these politicians. We got the same people doing nothing. You know what I'm saying? They give the money to the organizations that do nothing. I can tell you from my own experience that most of the organizations in Philadelphia that do good work, they don't get any money. Those organizations do it out of their heart. And that's the Charles Foundation. We don't get any funding. We do everything for the muscle. You know what I'm saying? Last year, SEPTA donated a city bus to us. So we have a city bus. And what we did, we transferred that bus into a mobile trauma center. So when the weather changes and it gets warm, we pull up the parks and we do therapy with children and families. The Charles Foundation also does a grief support, you know what I'm saying? Because when my son was first murdered, we went to a program and the program that we went to kept us stuck. So we created our own program out of that. That's one of the reasons why the Charles Foundation came about. So one of the things that we did in 2013, there was a criminologist named David Kennedy out of John Jay College in New York. And he came up with a pilot. And the pilot was named Focus Deterrence. And what it did, we started in South Philadelphia. We picked a 40-block radius and we identified 40 people that were liable to be killed or kill somebody. We took them into a judge's chambers with the DEA, the ATF, the top police brass, and social services. And the year that we did that, there was a 40% reduction in homicide. They gave us $150,000 the first year we did that. The next year they gave us $100,000, and after that the city they're going to fund it. But they're doing that pilot right now in Chester, PA, because they know that it works. So there's some things that work, you know what I'm saying, that we can divert these kids from the violence, you know what I'm saying? But you have to give them opportunities, you know what I'm saying? You have to give them opportunities, you know, jobs, food, education. You know, how you gonna close schools and swimming pools when you got a city full of kids with nothing to do? When I was growing up as a kid, we had the PAL. You know, you took up music in school. They don't have any of those things no more. When I was in second grade, I was on the chess team. No, they don't have those outlets anymore. So these kids don't have anything to do.
I appreciate you so much. And I'm glad you're here and you ended up hopping on Zoom. You're doing great. But I want to tag in because that last point that you made actually is a beautiful segue to Erin and the work that she's doing to advocate for returning resources back to the youth that are in our communities who have been negatively impacted by that neglect and that reduction in funding towards social supports. So Erin, the floor is yours.
Hi, everyone. Once again, I'm Erin Gill-Wilson. I'm a freshman here at the nation's very first HBCU, Cheney University, majoring in criminal justice to make a change legally within the court system and criminal justice system. But prior to being able to do that, I need to start my community first. Growing up in Philadelphia, a lot of my family members and even one of my teachers, people that I've grown up around, got incarcerated. And when I was younger, I never really understood it until I got older and realized that we're nothing but a product of our environment. If we grow up around financial struggles or with deemed struggles, or if we grow up around a lack of resources, we're not getting the education that we need. We feel like, or we aren't being provided those career and job opportunities in the same way that our white counterparts are being provided. We feel like we have to resort into other options, especially options that are implemented in the communities that we reside in. So therefore, when people are being incarcerated just for trying to make a means of living or just trying to get their child something to eat or just provide some clothing on their back, they're put through that whole system. And then after leaving that system, it's like they have to navigate the world again. They have to remember how to live again. You aren't really provided with any job opportunities. You aren't really provided with support even while being incarcerated, and even after being incarcerated, you aren't provided with mental health support, education opportunities, anything in that sort. So just thinking about that. And then I also realized that mental health is a huge struggle within our society. Aside from mental health, social health as well. A lot of people believe that to seek mental health support or to reach out to someone when in mental struggles is something that's lame or something to do. But after experiencing my friend's grieving process to losing her mom to suicide, I realized that this was something much bigger than ourselves, especially at the ripe age of 13 years old. So I wanted to make mental health a thing where as though it's prioritized. You have these resources. Here are the resources that are available to you. You can use them. So I started my nonprofit organization as just a small mentorship program. It just started as a peer mentorship program. I got a little Zoom. My cousin bought me a Zoom account. And so I just had my friends come in. My friends bought their friends in a way that promotion and communication works. You tell a friend, they tell a friend, and those people join. And then we talked about the type of topics that were passionate to them. A lot of people within my mentorship program said that they wanted to start their own business. They said that they wanted to be a teacher. They said that they want to be a doctor. Okay. Well, here we're going to look up how to get your LLC. We're going to look up what type of business plan you want to construct. We want to look at what type of teacher you want to be. We want to look at what type of doctor you want to be. Here's this doctor. I'm connecting you with this person. I'm connecting you with that person, because there is a way of life much bigger than the one that we already knew. So that's what my mentorship program started off as. And then my nonprofit branched out to be something more as I've attended different events. I've attended this youth march. I believe the march was on Saturday, y'all. It was pouring down raining. and we marched for gun violence. And it was led by Vanessa. She's a 17-year-old gun violence activist in Philadelphia, also with Community Curator, an organization who works to support other nonprofit organizations and help their vision. I worked with those two orgs, and the march was amazing. But through Herb Ed, we look at gun violence and everything from an educational standpoint. So we have been in meetings with the school district of Philadelphia, just trying to implement some mental health support and some gun violence support. So just to make sure that despite the fact that we all, especially as Black and African-American or Black or African-American students, we're all being affected and impacted by the gun violence that's happening in our city rapidly. It's an epidemic. So I want them to know, like, especially other students who were once in my shoes in high school, especially in Philadelphia, like you have these options, you have this support, and I'm going to make sure that you have it. So I met with people from the school district to implement some mental health programs. We have a fellowship program in which we take students in and we help them start a project, whatever project they want to do. We make sure we help them from start to fruition. We make sure we have students, and we just want to just make sure we helping them any way that we can, because the youth is the change. We got to be the change we want to see. So thank you.
Thank you so much, Erin. I feel like y'all have demonstrated the beauty of people power. And y'all both touched on something that connects me to the next question, which starts with this quote. A nation that continues year after year to spend more money on military defense than on programs of social uplift is approaching spiritual death. Both of you touched on how our communities have been divested from, and how in order to pour back into our communities, you all have had to get creative with these resources as opposed to them being available to us in abundance. So I'm going to ask this question to Bill. How does our nation's continued investment in violence impact us all? What could exist if we invested in the soul of our nation instead?
Thanks, Michaela, and thanks to Yancy and Erin. I look forward to hearing from Caleb as well. The notion that the U.S. budget signals that we're approaching spiritual death suggests that a budget is actually a spiritual document as well. It names the priorities. It names or dehumanizes people, devalues people in need, and minimizes their worth at a national scale. I think it's important. This is not the only place Dr. King in the speech speaks of the nation as having a spiritual dimension. He also talks about the motto, actually, of SCLC being to save the soul of the nation, as you were suggesting there. And on the one hand, that suggests, which is true, I think, of all of the structures of power, that they actually have an invisible dimension. There's both, and this is a biblical notion that the scriptures suggest about the principalities and powers, that they're visible and invisible, heavenly and earthly. And so often we're dealing simply with the material dimension of the structures, when actually part of their power over us is their invisibility, their spiritual dimension. And that's true of the soul of a nation that was built on genocide, indigenous genocide, chattel slavery. That nation were formed in the culture of what we call the culture of violence, and that has a spiritual impact on all of us. One of the dimensions of this, and I'm not even getting to your point yet, but one of the dimensions of this is how we need to tend our own souls in the face of these sort of budgetary assaults, I'll call them, on our communities. had friends who were resisting the Trident submarine up in Puget Sound, and when it was, well, it's where it's based, and there's a resistance community there. They said we have to face the Trident being based in here in Vancouver. We also need to face the Trident in ourselves. So the part of tending the soul of the nation involves tending our own souls. We're talking about a military budget of, in the present year, I think it's $886 billion. When the Poor People's Campaign calculates militarization as a third of discretionary spending, they include law enforcement, mass incorporation, deportations, and detention as part of militarization. And that figure is well over $1 trillion. When you think what that could be doing in our neighborhoods for mental health, what it could be doing to give young people alternatives to conflict and gun violence, what it could be doing and to fund housing and all of that. I mean, the things there are ways of calculating that stuff that says how many nurses or teachers are, and we can barely comprehend what's being stolen from our neighborhoods. So we can be approaching spiritual death, or we can move toward healing and transformation.
I appreciate that so much. Thank you for those words, as well as those numbers that really put what we're dealing with in perspective to this conversation. So, Caleb, I'm going to come over to you now. And I do believe this question is in a similar vein to where Bill started to take us. But back to referencing the speech, almost 6 decades ago, King linked the U.S. colonial warfare that's taking place overseas to the racist treatment of people of color right here in the United States. Undeniably, we know that police forces across the United States have been, they've employed the Israeli Defense Force to train officers and share tools of surveillance to control low-income Black communities, Muslim, Middle Eastern, and North African communities, as well as Latinx communities. So some people may have a tendency to see what's happening globally as far away or disconnected to what's happening right here in our own neighborhoods. And I want to ask, how do you make the link for those who are just coming to these connections, or even in a space of denial about our shared responsibility to be a part of the solution?
I think that's a really good question. And I would say that this country has a really, really huge debt to pay. And I don't mean in reference to the World Bank or the IMF, but to all the Black people and all the people of color that it has effectively marginalized domestically and internationally, has capitalized off of us, and then has then criminalized us. And what we see is that through U.S. foreign policy, like it intentionally creates instability all across the world, all across the globe, forces people to seek refuge in other countries that are not their own, and then criminalizes them for seeking that refuge. So I want to really point out that this nation is still segregated in terms of neighborhoods and in terms of schooling, in terms of healthcare. And it capitalizes off of this segregation that it supposedly doesn't exist anymore. This nation is in this colorblind society in which we live in, according to, all of our politicians. And we see that the people who suffer most from this are people in the Black community, people of color. And Just as our communities are strictly segregated, strictly surveilled, and strictly policed, Palestinians in Palestine are constantly under 24/7 surveillance from the Israeli occupation forces. They live in a constant state of fear of being abducted into an Israeli prison for no reason, with no trial, in a constant state of subjugation to strip searches, home raids, even the occupation of their own homes for days. Um, and the U.S. has decided amidst this genocide, that the best way to aid Palestinians in Gaza is by dropping food aid on them from the sky in the morning, then dropping bombs on them in the afternoon and the evening. Um, and Palestinians can't even go to pick up this aid that's entering Gaza without being shot at by the Israeli occupation forces and without being threatened. Picking up aid and food and water is a threat to their life at this point. And we see on the other side of this that Israelis are protesting and blocking humanitarian aid from even entering the Gaza Strip, because they believe that Palestinians do not deserve food and water and basic humanitarian needs. And these are the underlying values of which are preventing which allowed this genocide to even happen in this first place, and which allowed the U.S. To send billions and billions to Israel every single year, which allowed the U.S. to send police to Israel to learn how best to criminalize our Black youth here and to surveil our communities here. Um, and what Palestine reminds me of a lot is, the constant surveillance Black neighborhoods are subjected to. It reminds me a lot of the constant police cruiser that strolls through every 30 minutes, every hour to patrol our neighborhoods. And um, ever since we were kids, we knew that we were under the watchful eye of the police. And we knew that there was always the police cruiser in the parking lot or right next to the basketball court or right next to the park that we're always playing at. And we knew that any action that we do can be deemed as criminalized, and that the police have the autonomy and every right to come and do as they please. So this is the underlying values that give the police and the Israeli occupation forces the impunity to pick on any person of color they see on the street and subject them to any type of stop and frisk, to a pullover without justifiable cause, to a beat down because they were having a stressful day and want to take it out on the first person of color that they see. And this is really disturbing because right now, and here at Swarthmore College, a Black student of color we're in the process of helping and trying to support a Black student of color who's been constantly targeted by our public safety officers, which are basically just campus police. And he has, for the past 3 days, been constantly surveilled and targeted by a police officer for simply existing and for no reasonable cause, and has had racist comments made towards him multiple times. And the student is in physical and emotional distress. And yeah, it's just really hurtful to see these constant state of violence like reproducing themselves. And I just want to connect it back to how Palestine really reminds me of the redlining that happens in our communities, the intentional withholding of resources to the Black communities that you guys have already pointed out, and the fact that our neighborhoods are put in food deserts intentionally. The fact that Flint, Michigan still does not have access to clean water to this day for very intentional reasons, that our schools are underfunded and deteriorating for very intentional purposes. And this money that is going to Israel, the $7 billion that's going to Israel, the billions and billions of dollars going to Israel can go to our communities for community-led and community-led alternatives to policing and to schooling and to food access and to healthcare. And we don't need to be sending this money to Israel for it to uphold apartheid and ethnic cleansing. And I really truly believe that organizing and activism is a necessity for all of us, Black people and people of color, because if we don't do the work, then no one will do it. And we owe it to those who came before us to continue their legacy. And I want to end off by a quote from Malcolm X, who said, that we are not outnumbered, but we are outorganized. And that perfectly encapsulates the current state of the Black community here, the Black diaspora, and people of color in general. And this is why organizing and activism, I believe, is a necessity, and why we're all of our struggles are interconnected in every way possible.
Much respect for everything that you said. Thank you, Caleb. Another thing that I heard, and as you were speaking, is we are facing a genocide, multiple genocides across this globe that our hands are directly tied into. There is no greater urgency than stating that at this time. So I appreciate you for bringing that language into this call and for resituating that. So I'm going to open up with actually another quote that connects to that in this unfolding conundrum of life and history, there is a such thing as being too late. And that procrastination is still the thief of time. So I guess my question is, for those of us that are organizers, specifically those of us who do nonprofit work or do it through university settings, these systems have been cultivated with so much red tape, so much blockage, so much let's pause and think, let's do all of this, which ultimately benefits the existing social order. So I just want to ask the question, how do we resist that tendency to not act swiftly and with urgency?
Everything that he talked about is going on in Kensington right now. They're trying to clean up Kensington, and instead of putting those people in treatment, they're locking them up. Another thing that Martin said was, he said that our lives are meaningless until we stand up and talk about the things that matter. You know, and people talked about mental illness, and mental illness is a big part of violence, you know, especially when it comes to incarceration, because 9 times out of 10, a person is misdiagnosed or not diagnosed at all. And as a family business, that's something that we do. We take care of people with chronic mental illness and intellectual disabilities. And there's a huge population of runaway kids in Philadelphia, a huge population of homeless kids in Philadelphia. So my son, Dante, that was also murdered, we created an LLC in his name. And Dante is an acronym for Discovering Opportunities to Nurture, Teach, and Empower. And me and my wife are in the process of buying a building to house these runaway youths. But we have to educate people. You know, listen, our mayor ran on stopping Fritz. Our mayor, during her campaign, held a sign saying that she supports Israel. So we need to get out there and educate people, because talking amongst ourselves, we're just preaching to the choir. So we need to get out there and educate the people, you know what I'm saying, that these people are stringing along. Because 9 times out of 10, listen, the only reason Sherelle Parker won was because a lot of people wanted to see the first Black woman. If all those other people wasn't in the race, it would have been Rebecca Reinhardt or Helen Gim, you know?
Absolutely. So we're coming up on our time. A lot of gems have been dropped. A lot of calls to action have been made, and I appreciate all of y'all so much. So I'm just going to get into the last question, and we can just kind of snake around. King told us, right? Now let us begin. That was 6 decades ago. Now let us rededicate ourselves to the long and bitter but beautiful struggle for a new world. So I just want to give everybody some space to say a couple of words, or maybe a lot of words, depending on what's on your heart, about what's the world you hope to build? And how can we make sure this world is shared with our neighbors and something that can be inherited by those that come after us?
I'm speaking first. I have a few things, you guys. So first, I just want to start with love, y'all. I believe that in my community, or I feel in my community, there isn't a lot of love anymore or family feeling. When I was growing up, my grandpa block, I grew up in my grandpa's neighborhood area. It's the Southwest Philadelphia, the Southwest area in Philadelphia. And everybody just knew everybody. Like if you were getting into something and you were playing down the street, down the block, and you knew you wasn't supposed to be doing something, you was doing it, you ain't have to worry about your mom getting on you because she was at work. You had 1,000 other moms on the block. Everybody wanted to support you and had your best interest at heart. It was a family thing. Like everybody knew everybody, the older people, it was a lot of respect for them. It doesn't feel that way anymore. I remember even they used to bring lunches to the block and all of that, like the little lunches, just in case some people didn't have lunch over the summer. It was a family feeling. Aside from that, building up our recreation centers. I believe it was Mr. Yancey who said this, but our recreation centers and children nowadays do not have anything to do after school. I was in a million things. I did cheerleading, I did drill team, I did debate, I did chess, I did you name it. Any STEM clubs, I did it all. But there aren't really a lot of after school programs anymore or anything keeping students really involved. Like the recreation centers, a lot of them are torn down. They aren't funded at all. They aren't building them up anymore. Children do not have anywhere to go, not only for just something to occupy their time or just keep them in a playful mood, but also for mental health support. Like we need to implement these actual, instead of like just academic counselors, we need actual mental health and licensed therapists within our schools and within our school communities, especially if we're in a city that's facing a gun violence epidemic. We need these grief counselors on deck. Aside from that, I also have down I like a social media influence as well, like in my perfect little world that I'm imagining. I believe that a lot of social media influence, as well as the influence from music and things like that, it can portray a really, really negative image in which a lot of people would like to pursue. And that influence, I don't believe is good or helpful. Aside from that, more equitable education. I believe that education is I believe I may have took this quote from somebody, but education is the key to the future, y'all. We need a more equitable education. We need accurate education as well. A lot of these textbooks are all washed down. A lot of these textbooks are not providing no actual information. And so I believe that if we had the information that we needed within the textbooks, we had more Black representation within schools. We had teachers that look like us and teachers that we can go to. And we see them doing things like, aside from that, career development options, more justice in the criminal justice system, that speaks for itself. Is really so sad. And it causes my mind to spiral when I think about all of my Black brothers and uncles and cousins that has been incarcerated for just trying to make a way of life. And then even after, and people who are wrongfully accused as well, even after leaving the criminal justice system or getting out of jail, you're still forced to navigate this world that you never had for your own. You never had it ever. So it's really just so sad, but those are the things. I'll pass it on to someone else.
Don't all speak at once. I feel energy coming from both Yancey and Bill. Yancey, your light just turned green.
Yeah, but listen, God willing, if I wake up tomorrow morning, I'll be 64 years old. I want to say to the sister and the brother and everybody that's on this Zoom, don't stop. Don't stop. I mean, there has been times where I wanted to give up because it seemed like I wasn't making headway, but I can't stop. You know what I'm saying? I got to keep forging forward because, like you said, if we don't do it, who's going to do it? You know what I'm saying? And we just opened up a chapter in Miami. So there's a Charles Foundation in Miami and the projects out there. And we went out there over the weekend. We took 25 bags of clothes. We took Pampers. We took feminine supplies. We took portraits of gun violence. We did that a whole weekend, man. But and we do all that from the muscle. We don't get no grants or any of that stuff, man. And I want to say to just keep doing what you're doing. We need people like you. You know what I'm saying? We need somebody to be out front. The only difference now than decades ago when Malcolm marched, back then there were people willing to die for what they believe in. We had gotten soft. That's why when I do marches, I don't want to let the media know. You know what I'm saying? Let them know after we get down there. Let them know after we shut down the Walt Whitman Bridge. You know what I'm saying? Let them know after we shut down Broad Street. Because I tell you what, when the Eagles won the Super Bowl, they shut down businesses. They shut down Broad Street. The people didn't go to school. Every murder that happens should be like a national murder. You know what I'm saying? The way they show up for Trayvon Martin, they should show up for Pookie that gets shot from around the corner. You know what I'm saying? We need to put pressure on these people, man. If we don't they let us march and do the stuff they let us do that all day long. If we don't put no pressure on them, ain't nothing's gonna change. You know, I'm the guy that want to shut stuff down. I want to shut down Broad Street. I want to shut down the Walt Whitman Bridge. That's the type of stuff I do. I'm a street person. You know what I'm saying? I want to be on the street. I want to be on the battlefield. You know what I'm saying? And then for everybody that's on this call, don't stop doing what you're doing.
Caleb, I see the hand up. I'm gonna just let y'all rock with this.
Yeah, no, I feel everything y'all been saying. It's been saying with me really well. And I want to add on that I really imagine a world where we're moving away from these kind of Western and European values of individualism, of gatekeeping, of competition, and where we're in a world of where we turn towards our communities with care and we return towards each other with care and generosity and understanding, and where we're able to build each other up and where we have those resources. And when I think about schooling, like what Aaron said, we need to have schools where children are taught in a caring environment and where they're not treated like robots, where they're not treated like just things you need to drill information into, and where they have an environment where they're able to foster relationships with their teachers, with their peers and whatnot. And also, I also imagine a world where we're not weighed down by the impossible task of making enough money to provide for our families, to the point where our whole lives are consisted of going to work and then going to sleep and repeating. A world where, where we can have it, where we, like my parents have been working their ass off for years in these these minimum wage jobs, low income jobs. And, you see people working every single day for years and years, but still not having enough to provide, still not having enough to make do, to make rent and whatnot. So, and, this leads to like you're not able to build relationships with those around you. You don't have the time to build relationships and to foster relationship with your family, with your siblings, with your brothers, with your friends and whatnot. And we need to have a world. I imagine a world where we're able to do these things and provide for ourselves, of having the basic needs of housing and food. And yeah, that's what I gotta say. Thank y'all.
I was appreciating the way Aaron began, just what we need is love. And I'm hearing that in Yancy and Caleb as well, that's really what's underneath things, what Dr. King in various places called the beloved community. And I think in terms of the theme of the gathering here in Philadelphia of ICU, we are here, thinking of that community, including the ancestors. and that community, including those who are to come, and Earth itself and her creatures. That's the beloved community that I hear in your voices and that I yearn for in my own.
I just want to say thank you all so much for all that was contained within this call, but will not stay here. We'll go back into the communities that we're a part of, that we're doing this work with, as well as the communities we've yet to encounter, but we know we must build with and together. So as you can probably tell by my lighting, the sun is starting to set. And we promise we to keep you for the hour. So I just want to say thank you all immensely again. Yeah, for real. Michaela says it. Just in general, I'm breaking the fourth wall. I've turned off panelists, and all of that was just me being like, "Thank y'all for real. I appreciate y'all." Sorry, Bill, whose video is off, that I didn't hold that together better.